welcome to Delhi.
Thank you.
And congratulations for the Sahitya Award.
Thank you, Anjali.
And I think this is the first time an Indian English playwright has won this prestigious award.
That's right. It's unprecedented. Yes.
So what do you think this is going to do to the Indian English theatre in this country?
Well, I think this has been really the kind of endorsement that Indian English theatre in the country has been looking for, because up till now it seems as if it belonged to a fringe section of society, and that it was seen as not quite theatre, not quite art.
Right.
That it was more of a kind of theatre club kind of thing, and perhaps justifiably so. I'm not saying that it's not entirely unwarranted, that that feeling and opinion, but I think since so much has actually happened, and there has been a serious attempt to, you know, to have a kind of movement in this direction, because there are enough English-speaking people, and there are enough people who want to do theatre and write in the language.
Right.
So this has been a kind of endorsement of that effort.
So what made you enter this fringe activity almost? Because when you started writing, there was not really an active history of Indian English theatre that was being performed at any rate in our cities.
Well, I had no choice, because my interest lies primarily in drama. So I didn't have a choice that, oh, I'll write for drama, or I'll write a novel, or I'll write poetry. It has always been drama right from the beginning, because that's where my focus is. And I began writing for the stage quite later on in my career, so to say, in theatre. I began as an actor, then I moved on to direction, and then finally, because there is a dearth of scripts written originally in the English language, Indian scripts, that's why I decided to try my hand at it.
Right. How would you differentiate your work from the only other English playwrights who are known for original writing in India, such as Karim Bhoy and Nissim Ezekiel?
Well, they are the forerunners of the Indian English writing for the stage movement, and I think Nissim Ezekiel is really known as a poet, and Asif Karim Bhoy was extremely prolific, and I think they were writing for their time in the 60s and early 70s, I think, and I'm writing for my time, so I think that's what we have in common. And a lot has happened in the country in these 30 years, almost 40 years. And so I guess I'm dealing with contemporary issues, which perhaps are different from the issues that were dealt with in the 60s by these playwrights.
Right, but the contemporary issues that you deal with are also not limited to just the 80s and 90s in this country. For example, one of your major themes is that of gender, which you've dealt with in both, in almost all your plays, from Bravely Fought the Queen, Dance Like a Man, right down to Tara.
Right.
So these aren't really limited to the 90s, but
That's
your treatment of this is very thing. So how did it change, do you think, from the first play that you wrote to Tara?
Well, it changed quite a bit, because in Where There's a Will, although I did deal with gender, it was really very much within the conventional setup.
Right.
And it was the housewife who had no option but to, you know, exactly follow her husband's instructions, even after he died and he was literally ruling from the grave. And she's just not the kind of woman who would have said, to hell with you, I'm going to leave you, you know, a la Nora or whatever, and, you know, start her own life and, you know, discover herself. But if you look at, say, Bravely Fought the Queen, the battles are far more visible, but at the same time, they still can't leave.
Right.
You know, that's their battleground, and that's their home, and they're going to fight those battles, and they're going to stay right there. So, but there has been a change even in those 5 to 6 years between those two plays.
Right.
And I think Tara, although that came earlier to Bravely Fought the Queen, actually is more rebellious in that sense.
Yeah, Tara is in a sense almost a final word on the gender issue, because where Dance Like a Man explores the stereotyping of gender for both men and women, Tara really shows you the senior side of that discrimination. So Tara is a more extreme play, but it was written before Bravely Fought the Queen.
That's right, yes.
So what gave you the idea for Tara? I mean, how did that come about?
Well, basically it began with, reading an article in a medical journal about Siamese twins being separated. And of course, they're invariably of the same sex. And there was this thing about a fused leg, and which had qualities of both left and right. So there had to be some careful consideration as to which twin was supplying the blood to the leg, and the journal went into details because obviously it was a very unique operation and separation, although that was the inspiration. But I think by then, having written Dance Like a Man, I was prepared to take on the gender issue head on, and I think that was a powerful metaphor. Again, the play is misread, and people tend to focus on the medical details, but that's really not what the play is about. It's a metaphor either for being born equal as male and female, and sharing so much more, and with the surgical separation comes the cultural distinctions and the prejudices as well. But on another level, it could also deal with the individual having the male and female self, and how the female self is, whether your gender is male or female, is definitely given the lower priority.
Yeah, in a sense, the distinction between the two, between Chandan and Tara, comes up even before they are born.
That's right.
Because they're seen as two distinct children who are hugging each other in the womb.
Yes.
And once they are born, of course, a process of gender discrimination carries on. But what do you think is the most explosive scene in the play which makes this completely clear?
Well, I think it is the revelation in the end about, Tara's love for her mother, which up till then was unquestionable. She suspected her father for having done something, was in some way, but she had no idea what it was. But her love, her mother's love, was unquestioned, and she did not question that. So when she comes to know of the truth, or we only have the father's version. We don't know whether that is the real truth or no, again. But it does sort of break her away like a shooting star from the mother. And I think with that, that's the tragedy. She dies. We don't know how she dies, but we know that that's the end of Tara. And I think that somehow all the attitudes towards Tara and the relationship between her mother, her father, and her brother, which we see through the play. In hindsight, you could see where it was colored, or where it was blinkered, or where it was being compensated for.
Right. In any text, there are also other scenes which somehow seem to actually coalesce all the major things after you've seen the whole play, and then those scenes are the ones that stand out as representative of all the different things that any one text is trying to convey at the same time. For you, which would be those scenes in Tara?
Well, that's a little difficult, because you do have various forms of prejudices which recur as a variation on a theme. So, in one sense, gender prejudice against feminine gender is a strong theme. But you also have the class differences coming. And of course, all these prejudices are interrelated, because ultimately it is about power, the patriarchal system. It is to acquire an appropriate power, for this what I call, what Dan says in the end, to live in a forced harmony. It's forced because it's not equal, but at the same time there is a harmonious existence, because as long as you know your status and you continue to play and stay within your station, then there is harmony. But there is also discontent, and that's why it needs the kind of ferment which Tara is able to bring about.
Right.
But it's still a tragedy.
Yeah, because Tara deals, as you rightly said, with hierarchies of all kinds. There's also the hierarchy between the doctor with his knowledge is power,
Right.
Who is set apart very clearly, and as the hierarchy between Rupa and Tara, as well as between Tara and her twin, her other self.
Yes.
So how did you deal with all these opposing things? How could you, what made the gender issue come up as most important over class, caste, region, science, male, mother and child, and father and child?
Because I think that's the most visible form of discrimination in our country. Well, you could say that class is the most visible form, but in a way it is so ingrained, the class system, that sometimes it remains unquestioned. You can order your servants about, nobody questions you. Say a laborer cannot walk into a fancy restaurant, that remains unquestioned. But gender, in a way, the inequalities somehow lead a conflict, because there is so much proximity. There is a sharing of space between the two genders, which is not so with the class differences, because when you do have the class set up, you have a segregation of spaces as well. But whereas with gender, this is not so. The conflict is obviously going to be more apparent and visible. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that it was an organic choice of gender being the issue. I don't think there was such a conscious effort on my part. Because
you also have the character of Rupa, who is the same age as Tara, who is also a woman from roughly the same socio-economic background.
That's right.
But there is a class difference between Tara and Rupa.
That's right.
And there is also discrimination between both of them on both sides.
Yes, that's true. And I think, again, what I'm saying is that Tara is not the victim. She has her prejudices as well, and she uses them as a weapon to fight discrimination against her. If Rupa is going to stare at her when she walks across the road, when she limps across the road, and she, examines her artificial leg and knocks on it and whatnot, Tara is going to pull her cards and say that, I speak English better than you do, and hence you're inferior to me. It's such a ridiculous system we have, but then that's the only weapon she has against Rupa. So in a way she is buying social perceptions of what is superior and what is inferior, the same way as Rupa is doing to her.
And is the only possible end or harmony for Dan to leave once he leaves the house? He's still obviously not free of the trauma of what happened between him and
It haunts him. It continues to haunt him.
But in the end, the only reconciliation with Tara is possible after the mother has died.
Yes, and after they have died as well. Because Tara has died and Dan dies, and then you have this vision of this union between the siblings of male and female uniting on a different time and plane.
So what you're really saying at some level, perhaps through Tara, is that as long as we continue to do this kind of differentiation, there is no end possible in this world.
Absolutely, yes, because it is an artificial difference in that sense. Biologically there are polarities between the genders, which is meant to seek the union of one another. But the cultural polarities are artificial and are actually boundaries and hinder the natural unions of male and female, whether it's body to body or within oneself.
Which would be what would be the turning point, you think, where you, in your play, when once you've established that Tara is not a victim and that we have to look at her not as a girl who is physically handicapped, but who is just somebody who has been handicapped by the very fact that she's been born the gender that she has?
Right. Well, we get to, there are several scenes in the play which deal with her furies and how she fights her battles. When she talks about how she blackmailed her classmate into, you know, doing her homework for her, and when she, even very much earlier on, when she shows up Rupa for her malapropisms and her, you know, her lack of of usage of, certain idioms, and you get to know very earlier on that she is sort of fighting for a superior position. And then when she finally confronts Rupa and says, how does it feel having one tit smaller than the other, and let me see how it feels, you know, when other people stare at you, you know, the way they stare at my leg, and how would you feel? You won't be able to come out of your house and whatnot. So those are places where we get some insight into Tara's inner life and her anger, basically. And you know, the idea is, so it's so easy to sympathize, because sympathy is another way of polarizing as well.
Right.
You sympathize with someone and you're saying that they're not me. You know, I'm in a different location and I'm superior and I am the one to sympathize. So stay there and I'll sympathize with you.
Right, but you don't sympathize with Chandan. He doesn't call for that. Was that a very deliberate characterization?
Again, yes, because I really felt that these people had their battles and they were fighting them, and Chandan fought by withdrawing into his music, into his own world, and later on he fights by again withdrawing, by going into another space entirely. So these are, you know, ways of fighting his battles. And again, I didn't want this entire notion of sympathy for them.
Has Tara been your most successful play?
Well, actually it's Dance Like a Man, because that's somehow been commercially more successful. But that doesn't mean that Tara hasn't had its share of success as such. So it's a little difficult because the metaphor is so strong and overwhelming that sometimes people get caught up in the metaphor and reject the play.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Mahesh. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Anjali.